We haven't spoke, which is really bizarre now a month into this season, but just your overall take on 7-5-2 for the Maple Leafs through 14 here.
You kind of are what your record says you are in this opinion, right? I just look at their bottom six and the scoring that they're missing, but some bright spots here. Obviously, Joseph Woll, not having him to start, and the way Anthony Stolarz has stepped up, right? This has been that question mark where I think even giving Woll that contract and knowing that he had the keys to the castle now, I think Anthony Stolarz has come in here and been the Leafs' best player. He's been arguably unbelievable every single night. Even if you look at a few of his losses, I was fortunate to be at the game in Minnesota. In overtime, he was great. And that's a 2-on-0 goal where Boldy holds onto it, kind of makes him bite. And that is what it is, that play. The other game in Montreal where he was arguably the best player for the Leafs too in that loss where Montembeault kind of stole the show. So it's been exciting. I think there's always that little pass of where, a new coach comes in, Craig Berube's trying to get them ready to play playoff hockey, right? So I feel like we lose a little bit of that offense, but we're gaining something, building towards something. We'll see if it's sustainable, especially when you start taking away some guys' points.
And when you saw the way Stoley's season unfolded so quickly with Joseph Woll going down in basically training camp, he gets thrown to the fire in that market, need to do it now, didn't really have time to mentally prepare for that situation. Spotlights on him. I mean, it's kind of like setting the table for his career in Toronto, and he absolutely ran with it. What were your thoughts when that all unfolded?
I think it just goes to show you, Rosie, you get it. Like, especially guys that play like defensively or goalies, there just takes time. There's experience. There's just the compartmentalization of like what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, being the guy. So for him to have this slow burn over time to get to where he's at, he's ready for this, right? And then he was on the big stage last year. He got to see firsthand the way Bobrovsky, one of the best guys that knows how to take care of himself. He's an everyday guy. And I think you just start putting that stuff away, right? You start growing as a player, developing. And now you get thrust into the spotlight. And it's not overwhelming for a guy like Stolarz because he's been through it. He has so many different experiences. So I think that is a perfect example and a great example of why he wanted to come to Toronto, because they gave Woll that contract when realistically he hasn't really done a lot in the sense of being healthy and playing a lot of games. Where he went here, he didn't go sign somewhere where they already had their guy. He didn't go sign in Winnipeg. Could have got more money where he knows those guys are proven. He came here for this opportunity and he's taken advantage of it.
Let's break this down technically. Of course, you got the goaltending background. What has made, in your opinion, watching this guy, what has made him so successful early on? Obviously, the numbers checked out last year for Florida. He was behind Bobrovsky, but more specifically this year, what has made Stolarz so good?
So from what I've seen in playing against Stolarz a little bit throughout my NHL career is just the simplicity that's brought to his game now. He is a big goalie, but at times he started to chase the play, right? We talk about being outside of our post. This is something you'll hear a lot with goaltending is like if you drew a camera or had a camera from over top of the net, you'd want to see your goalie hitting the post every time, playing within a little box, especially when you're a big guy like Anthony Stolarz. So the biggest thing I've seen is him selectively choosing his depth. When the puck goes high and there's traffic, yes, he's going to get to the top of the crease. He's going to be maybe outside the blue when it's a clear shot. But other than that, he's in the blue paint. He's hitting his post. He's never outside his post, where I think a great example for Leafs fans would be when we watched Samsonov last year when he was bad, he'd be 2 feet outside the post, right? And yes, he might make that initial save. What happens off the next one, right? Then rebounds come off you. Then you start to chase the game. And it's a gradual downhill slide in your game where with Stolarz right now, he is so calm and patient and boring. It's almost to the fact of like he doesn't beat himself. And I think that's been a huge credit to how he's learned and worked on his game to get to this point.
Yeah, that great point. Because as you were describing that, I'm thinking to myself, Sammy last year, and as much as he played well at times, the times he wasn't, he was sliding around the ice like scrambling. It was scrambly hockey, and what I really like about Joseph Woll is how calm and poised he looks. But after watching Stoley, I can't think of one time that he's been sliding around scrambling. He's there all the time, and there's so many times it goes cross ice to so and so just licking their lips, leaning on this stick, and I'm like, and Stoley's just there, and he's right up against the points. He's just in control of his game, and I can tell you as a fan watching, and I know on the bench being that guy being your goalie, it just breeds confidence, right? You can rely on them so much more.
100%. And you've gone through that. I've gone through it, been the guy where I've been struggling or I've been the guy on the bench watching the other goalie struggle. And you can feel the energy on the bench. You can feel the team. They don't want to give up a shot. They can't play naturally how they have to because they're worried about the pucks going in. Where right now there's confidence throughout this team in the way he's playing. But I also credit him in the fact of you start playing percentages as a goalie, right? Like if a guy's going to have the puck at the top of the circle on the half wall, maybe I'm right on my post because I know that there's a small percentage this guy can beat me. Now, if I'm a foot or two outside there, yes, that ups my percentage on making that initial save. But if that puck travels east-west, especially the way that guys move it across the zone, now I just made that save so much harder on myself. And this is something even for me, early in my career, I was athletic and I wanted to compete. I felt like I had to save every puck. Once I learned to like reel that in, my success rate went through the roof, especially, with a better coach team and a better decor now, the game getting more predictable for Stolarz is only going to help him improve. And I think it's going to help both goalies once Woll gets going here. I wouldn't just cast Woll away by any points. I think it's crazy to say at this point who's going to be the starter come playoff time. But right now, this is a really good problem to have for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I was going to say, like, personally, I think competition is healthy. And if you want to call it a friendly rivalry, I don't think Joseph Woll is done by any stretch. I think health is always a concern with him, but I only expect him to get better and better. What have you seen in his game so far this season? And what do you like? Who do you think has the higher ceiling? I know it's easy to say Stolarz right now, but Woll's younger, right?
Yeah, for sure. I still think he has a really high ceiling. This is a little different than when Pekka came back. I was done. Like there was no coming back from that. This was, but with Woll, he's the biggest thing for him. I think is just being healthy and kind of giving his team some confidence, right? Because I feel like at this point, even when he has a quality start, it's almost like that black cloud is hanging over him. They're like, well, how many can we get out of him until he's hurt again? Or and as a player, I think. And a teammate, you start to question that, right? A guy that's not durable, he's not available. And I think it starts to break down at your team when he is the guy. So having Stolarz come in here and play very well, I still think Woll has a huge upside, but I also think there's not a lot of pressure on him to be back immediately, play well. Like everyone's like, what happens to him? He got his contract, right? So it's not like he's on the button where if he gets hot the last 30 games of the season or whatever it is, no one's going to remember this start because he's already got his deal, right? He's not like he's fighting for that contract at this point. So I think that always throws a little bit of a wrench into it. But for me, Joseph Woll still has that high end potential. But we look at the Bruins, we look at teams numerous year. It's okay to have two guys that can go because by the end of the season, you're going to need both of them.
If you were one of those goaltenders, how would you want it to be deployed? Would you just kind of go with, say if there's a little break in the schedule and it's kind of a toss up on who to play, do you just kind of go with the hot hand and then switch hit him after that and just kind of have that 1A, 1B and just kind of go with the vibe of, well, this guy seems to be a little bit hotter right now and just ride that wave?
Yeah, I think that's the play here, right? And I think for Craig Berube, he's dealt with this before. He's had Ville Husso, he's had Binnington going where these guys, he's had some depth in goaltending. But I also feel like there is that, like for me with Stolarz is he's never done this before. He's never played a ton of, and not that he can't, right? I feel like that is sometimes we use that as a knock against a guy. Like, well, he's never done it before. Well, sometimes it's not in your control because you're playing with a $10 million goalie in Florida, or you're playing with a Pekka Rinne, or like, and I've been in that situation where it's like, he's not playing good, we have to play him to get him going. Or he's playing good, we have to play the hot hand. Where here, you can be more strategic and you can be more, I guess, just open communication lines with the goalie coach, with the goalies, their maturity. And the fact of the matter is what's going to be best for the Leafs to win on a nightly basis now. But at the end of the day, how can we set these guys up strategically to be their best come playoff time?
As a whole, it really feels like the Leafs organization is in good standing when it comes to the crease. Like, I know it was a small sample size. I know he's relatively green, but even like Dennis Hildeby, the guy's a monster first and foremost. He's a beast. But what was your read on Hildeby in his couple starts there?
I thought in his first start, he was really good. He played well. He looked poised, made some big saves. And the other game when he lost, I think it was against Jersey when he got lit up. I can't remember that correctly. That was the one he won. But he looked frustrated and he looked rattled. And this is where sometimes we talk about rushing guys to the NHL because all of a sudden when you're not having your night, you don't have your good stuff, it starts to deteriorate on you. And then you start second guessing yourself, where it's a lot easier to go through those phases and those problems when you're playing in the American Hockey League, right? Like I spent majority of 3 years up and down from the American League to the NHL. And I feel like that's what like toughened me up. That's what like made my head stronger than how I was able to bounce back in a game. If I gave up a shitty goal to start or whatever way it was going, where you start doing that on the big stage, next thing you know, you got everyone on X is lighting you up. Everyone's sending you Instagram messages how you're brutal. But you've already become that player you are once there's a little bit more maturity and some games under your belt. So for me, I think he has a high potential. But again, let's get him 50, 60 games in the American League where he can really develop and become that guy. So when he gets up to the NHL, he becomes a little more bulletproof.
Do you see a situation where Matt Murray could be in a Maple Leafs uniform again this year?
I think just injury based, honestly, Jay. I think he's done well and he's done a really good job rehabbing. I was able to skate with him in the summer. He's from Thunder Bay. So I spent some time with him and Mackenzie Blackwood on the ice. And he looks great, like mobility wise, but it's a thing where I just don't really see what his upside is in the sense of he is who he is at this point. But he is a good safety net for this team, right? Where maybe if someone gets hurt and Hildeby's playing well in the American League, Matt Murray's played well, let's bring him up as the number 3 because he has that maturity where he's not going to go in the net like I talked about Hildeby being a bit overwhelmed, where Matt can go and he's been in scenarios. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. I don't think you're really going to put him in a situation that's going to hurt his development at this point. It's gone. It's come and gone for him. But I think I think injury based would be the only way we see Matt.
The one thing we brought up quite a bit on the show so far this year is how different the blue line looks. Like, I was sort of skeptical at the additions. Both guys have been great. We'll see what Hakanpää can bring to the table. But how comforting is that for a goaltender if you're Stolarz, your Woll, your Hildeby, the blue line? Like, how impressed have you been with their start?
I think I've been very good, right? I think they've played a lot of shutdown minutes, right? At times you look at this team and you think, well, the lack of power play goals outside of the other night has been like the biggest issue, I would say. And on the D end, for me, is the predictability that these guys create, right? It's something I've dealt with. You know, when I went to Buffalo, we had a young, talented D-corps, but like defensively in the zone, it's almost like I started to try to do too much because I didn't know what was going to come at me, whether it was a backdoor pass or a fancy play. Where when I played in St. Louis and I was fortunate enough to benefit from like solid, predictable hockey, when we talk about Joel Edmondson, Jay Bouwmeester, Pietrangelo, Bertuzzo, Gunnar. There were so many guys that were mature and set in their ways. It made it so predictable for me. And for me, at times, my hardest part was getting to the rink on time. Like, get there, you knew what was coming at you, where sometimes you play on teams where it's unpredictable. Man, it is so hard as a goalie. And then you start to second guess yourself, right? Like, can I do more? Can I do this? Where when I watch Anthony Stolarz play right now, he knows what's coming at him. He's just got to play inside his box. And yes, you have to make timely saves like that 2-on-1 save he made the other night, where those are big saves, turning points in games. And other than that, be consistent, be predictable. It makes it so much easier for a goalie.
So I don't know if you saw this, Hutch, just to wrap, but in the last 20 years, before Tuesday night, only one Leafs netminder had shut out the Boston Bruins. Do you recall who that was?
No, I don't. I never saw that stat.
The monster, Jonas Gustafsson, number 2, Anthony Stolarz, man. I can't remember the time the Leafs, I don't know if you want to call it goalied, but they got some great saves. I thought Stoley was fantastic. Maybe it had shades of the playoffs. I thought Joseph Woll was great in the second half of that series, but the Leafs are on to something good with this crease right now, man.
Yeah, and I love it. And I think for a crease that it's been so inconsistent, right? We go back to all these times where we weren't getting saves at the right time, weren't getting this. Right now they are getting it. I don't want to start the parade yet because I've been on teams where when I hate referencing myself, but I was similar to Stolarz when I went to Buffalo, and we had a run where they were planning the Stanley Cup parade. We won 10 in a row, and it was like unbelievable. You got to keep that slow burn going, in my opinion. I think that's what Craig Berube is trying to set up here, is a team that is been a regular season juggernaut, but at the end of the day, one of those teams that can get in the playoffs. Like back in the day, the LA Kings, they weren't very fancy come regular season, but they played playoff hockey. When you get in, that was a team you did not want to face in a 7-game series.
Just reading on social media, apparently a very barky Craig Berube at practice today, which you love to see coming off a victory. We love to see that face, Carter Hutton. Thank you so much for your time today. We'll talk soon, buddy.
Thanks for having me, boys.
Thanks, Hutzy.
Our pleasure. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.